There's a really fascinating piece in the New Yorker by Ryan Lizza, and because they had to look at these Obama memos that had never been before seen, and we see the notes that the president made in them, and these are memos from, serious people, from Larry Summers, from Tim Geithner, from top advisors, Rahm Emanuel, and then the president's reaction to them. It's a serious piece, 25 pages in the New Yorker. I'm going to synthesize some of it for you because it really suggests much of what progressives think about Obama is true and has been true from the start. And these memos, to me, suggest a president who, from the very first time he was elected to the Senate, and really prior to that when he was in the Illinois Senate, was a guy who thought, here's what leaders do. Leaders work with the other side at all costs, and he believed that he could get this done. And the ignorance of Obama, the mistakes made in his presidency, which I think are undeniable, come from a lengthy, endless failure to recognize what was happening around him. A complete failure to recognize that the Republicans who he was reaching out to never had any interest in helping him. So early on, the piece begins fascinatingly. He's about to be sworn in. It's a cold January in 2009 as he waits for his January 20th inauguration. And he goes to George Will's house, Washington Post columnist George Will, the conservative columnist, and he's going to meet with a bunch of right-leaning journalists, people who, of course, would not support him. George Will's there, Michael Barone, David Brooks from the New York Times, Charles Krauthammer from Fox, William Kristol, Lawrence Kudlow, Rich Lowry, Peggy Noonan, very influential Reaganites, very serious right-wingers. And it's a charming little dinner, and some of them leave believing that this guy might be able to be a little different and bridge this gap. I don't know what these guys were thinking earlier, what we're thinking in any way. Now, keep in mind, this is a guy, Barack Obama, who burst onto the national scene when he made his speech at the Democratic National Convention in 2004. And when he ran for the Senate, he criticized, it says here's the pundits and prognosticators who like to divide this country into red states and blue states. That was the nature of his speech, where there at the convention in Boston, he said, there is not a liberal America, said Obama, and a conservative America. There is a United States of America. And then he goes on to become a big star. Now, in 2006, he writes his book, The Audacity of Hope. And there's so many great lines in this book that make you recognize exactly who Barack Obama was and from where his thinking comes from. Here's how he describes politics as a system seized by two extremes. Depending on your tastes, our condition is the natural result of radical conservatism or perverse liberalism, Tom DeLay or Nancy Pelosi, big oil or greedy trial lawyers, religious zealots or gay activists, Fox News or the New York Times. So I think when you read that, you see a guy who comes at this right off the bat with a grotesque misunderstanding of the disparate political elements of this country. Just put that quote up there one more time, just so you can see the things that he splits. Tom DeLay or Nancy Pelosi. Tom DeLay and Nancy Pelosi were not ideological opposites. Nancy Pelosi, if Nancy Pelosi had been in Congress in 1968, you maybe would describe her as very partisan. In this era, she's not nearly as partisan as Tom DeLay, and merely because they're known names, you don't equate them. And the fact that a guy like Barack Obama equates them gives instant credence to the argument that they are equal. And then when you talk about the big power of big oil or greedy trial lawyers, again, using a line, this whole thing is out of a Frank Luntz playbook of false equivalence. Big oil or trial lawyers, that one, by the way, the closest. Religious zealots or gay activists. Well, I mean, gay activists, people fighting for, and first of all, I wouldn't use the term religious zealots either because it minimizes people of great faith, but religious zealots or gay activists aren't extremists. I mean, that's like saying civil rights activists were extremists. Gay activists are not extremists, they're gay activists. And then the worst one of all, Fox News or the New York Times. One of them is interested in giving you information to get you through the day, telling you what's going on in the world, and one of them is a political organization designed to advance the cause of the right wing. Again, the suggestion to me, that's the kind of thing that you would expect to read from that organization in Washington, the third way, where we're all going to get along, we're going to be great. These things aren't the same, and a significant miscalculation by Obama, this is 2006, it's a miscalculation that he would continue to make up until today. although I think some encouraging signs in the last few weeks. This piece in the New Yorker goes on, in the back and forth between Clinton and Gingrich, he's talking about in the 90s when Bill Clinton was president, and in the elections, he says, of 2000, 2004, I sometimes felt as if I were watching the psychodrama of the baby boom generation, a tale rooted in old grudges and revenge plots hatched on a handful of college campuses long ago, played out on the national stage. Again, I think he is missing what was actually happening, which was a right wing unwilling to move at all, becoming intractable in his position, and then a left wing trying to reach out. The country moving far right, and Barack Obama, I think, completely missing it. Again, in The Audacity of Hope, he writes about, longingly, he says, he writes about the politics of the mid-20th century when both parties had liberal wings and conservative wings. There's a book, a political scientists Keith Poole and Howard Rosenthal, they have devised a strategy, the New Yorker reports, a widely used system to measure the ideology of members of Congress. They write, when Obama took office, there was no ideological overlap between the two parties. At all, and this was in 2009. No ideological overlap, so where he yearns for was gone, which makes yearning for it rather pointless. In the House, the most conservative Democrat, Bobby Bright of Alabama, farther to the left, and the most liberal Republican, Joseph Cao of Louisiana. And then the conservative Democrat, Ben Nelson of Nebraska, much further to the left than the most liberal Republican, Olympia Snowe. According to Poole and Rosenthal's data, and again, widely accepted data, both the House and Senate more polarized today than at any time since the 1890s. In the 1890s. Now, it also goes on here, polarization also affected the two parties differently. And here's the key, that it's not just polarization, it's a particular kind of polarization. And if you fail to acknowledge that particular brand of polarization, you're missing the whole point. The Republican Party has drifted much farther to the right than the Democratic Party. Jacob Hacker, we have a graphic for this. He's a professor at Yale. He wrote a book in 2006 called Off Center. He documented this trend, and he points out that since 1975, Senate Republicans moved roughly twice as far to the right as Senate Democrats moved to the left. And then, even more so, House Republicans moved roughly 6 times as far to the right as House Democrats moved to the left. 6 times. If you ignore that and merely say we're polarized, you're not in any way going to effectively deal with that kind of polarization. So what does Obama sort of do with all this information? I think what he does is make a number of significant and serious miscalculations. There was a fight that developed very early on as the recession, the magnitude of the recession set in for the incoming president. The incoming chairman of his Council of Economic Advisors, Christina Romer, against sort of Peter Orszag, the incoming budget director. He wanted fiscal restraint. She wanted a bigger stimulus package. And the president kept thinking, what I'll do is I'll work this out with Congress. But a Congress that instantly began to label him as far left, having no interest in working together. Stimulus, it reads here, first test of Obama's theory that politics is played in the center of the field and the GOP's ability to define him as a liberal. Late January 2005, the bill had cleared the House without a single Republican vote, without a single vote. A bill that he had significantly watered down. Jim DeMint in the Senate in South Carolina called it the worst piece of economic legislation Congress has considered in 100 years. Not since the creation of the income tax, says DeMint, has the United States seriously entertained a policy so comprehensively hostile to economic freedom or so arrogantly indifferent to economic realities. And he'd loaded this bill with tax cuts so that he could lure Republicans in. He brings in the tax cuts. Jim DeMint reacts this way. DeMint says about the tax cuts, think of it this way, he says, DeMint, if nearly every Democrat in Congress supports a tax cut, it's not really a tax cut. Again, Obama thinking, I'll be able to work this out. Even as the severity of the economic crisis became clear, they work on the Recovery Act, which ended up being $787 billion. 3 votes in the Senate. That got one of those votes came from Arlen Specter, who later became a Democrat. And it reads here, it was the first recognition that congressional Republicans had little interest in the president's offer to meet them halfway. It turned out, it says here, that the ideological divide he had set out to bridge was not just a psychodrama. That's right. And again, and then it starts to happen with health care as well. Initially, you see an administration that the memos show, they ask him about the option of doing it through reconciliation and not a vote. Reconciliation, as we all know, would have allowed a public option to pass. 60 votes, you couldn't get the public option through. The White House could still fashion a bipartisan bill, a memo sent to Obama says, but it was important to have the 51-vote option as a backup plan, the reconciliation backup plan. So they would say, below this language, he was offered three options: agree, disagree, or let's discuss. And he goes with agree. And then we know, of course, because he thought, no, I have to move out, I have to bring everybody together, we won't have the reconciliation. We'll just go for the 60 votes. And the only thing he could get passed, as we learned, of course, was something that did not have the key element in healthcare legislation, and that would be the public option. So, you know, it's a fascinating piece. I'll read one more thing here. As moderation, it says here, never swayed Republicans, nor did his attention to interest groups or willingness to cut beloved social programs. Through the rest of 2009, as the anti-government Tea Party movement gathers strength, it says, the Tea Party's gathering strength, conservative voters began to speak of creeping American socialism. Socialism. Barack Obama, socialist. Obama's aides quarrels over how the president should respond. Christina Romer, again, head of the Council of Economic Advisors, she wanted him to press for his Keynesian case for his policies, to defend the proposition of increased government spending, that will work, that was the responsible way for government to spend the money. Orsag continues to fight for Washington's deficit hawks, again, thinking that will appeal to the Republicans, but they don't even care about that. It doesn't matter that Orsag won the argument. Republicans weren't playing either way. Orsag urged him to create a deficit commission, partly because it can provide fiscal credibility during a period which is unlikely we would succeed in enacting legislation. One final quote, since we have our last graphic on this, from Thomas Mann and Norman Ornstein. These, again, well-respected guys, not guys from the Brookings Institute, and Norman Ornstein, of course, a conservative. These guys write this, and again, conservative. One of our two major parties, the Republicans, has become an insurgent outlier, ideologically extreme, it reads, contemptuous of the inherited social and economic policy regime, scornful of compromise, unpersuaded by conventional understanding of facts, evidence, and science, dismissive of the legitimacy of its political opposition. And these are the guys he's trying to work with. But of course, the bottom line is the Republicans won't play anyway. They never play anyway.